What's going on, boys? Thanks to our patrons and Fiverr customers, arm yourselves, life stuff. Two difficult but vindicating events have transpired, and it's a good opportunity to talk about what we're doing. Now, there's probably an ideal order to discuss these things in. However, we are instead going to focus on getting through it. The most recent work incident in brief. I tried to come up with a compromise, and nobody wanted any part in it, so it progressed into the ugly zone. Sphinxy got this shit we've been dealing with reported on. Now, it's minor and it's not going to matter, but nobody consulted any of us on it. So this little story got run about how awful we are. And when you boil people down, what they say they care about is not what they care about. The compromise I came up with, because this issue got forced and I was not the one who forced it, Sphinxy can step down and let someone else take her place if what her group is doing matters more to her than her position of power. And that is not at all what happened. It's never about what people say it's about or what they think it's about. It is always about power. And do you remember what we said in the Lessons in Corporate Leadership video? This move is the equivalent of trying to take everyone and everything down with you, or at the minimum, using social pressure to get me fired. When I'm the only one who's been even halfway trying to be kind and compromising for your dumbass. And that's most people. Why am I becoming more aggressive? It's because I need to. And if you want to be anyone or do anything, you need to. Rules and cordiality last only insofar as the person you're dealing with benefits from them. The moment they stop benefiting, they flip the board. They flip the board they pushed you to play on. And this is a nothing example. This is a job in a charity field. People with guns and the backing of the state do this. This is shrimp. Chump change. If you want to get anywhere, or to keep a system operating smoothly, or even to survive if you get singled out from the herd, you need fangs and claws. And that's what we're talking about today. You need the strength to engage in all forms of ugly conflict. Because when people don't get what they want, which is power or control, or when someone with power or control decides they want to exercise it on someone and you're the unlucky person picked out of the crowd, you drew the short straw, you can't walk into that unarmed and playing by anything but ugly rules. Because whatever rules of civility or decency you think you subscribe to don't exist. Not when you reach the power or control fight. Because there are multiple variations and levels of conflict, but the most serious ones always come down to overt aggression. And everything we just discussed is part of why you need strength. I've been thinking about the way the culture changes, and it changes slowly, and it's homogenizing. Now, changes in culture start with individuals. For whatever reason, someone finds themselves called on to break away from the homogenous culture. And if you feel this call and want to answer it, you're doomed. It's not going to end well. Very few people break away successfully. However, when someone manages to break away and start building something not socialized by the homogenous culture, if you get that far and survive, subcultures form around these people. And then, after enough time has passed, the culture selects which one of these subcultures it wants to adapt for itself or wipe out. Now, why would anyone want to break totally away from conventional acceptability, inasmuch as anyone socialized by a dominant culture can? I think it's usually being a victim of the culture's unaddressed problems and not fitting into or agreeing with an already established subculture. Now, the issue with breaking away is the fact the larger culture and even subcultures are homogenizing. They don't like anything different. And if you are identified as someone opposed to the larger culture, to a subculture, and opposed, or being identified as opposed, can be as simple as not subscribing to it, you put on a target hat, and then people start engaging you, which is where the levels and variations of conflict come in. Variations of passive aggression are the most common ones because to use passive aggression, one imposes the idea your opposition can be resolved without overt aggression. Because really, you aren't separate from the larger culture. You might think you are, but for someone deploying passive aggression, they are passive aggressively imposing on you the idea you can be made to fall in line without overt aggression. Because overt aggression is when established power structures or ideas, socializations, are being really challenged. There's no way you could be doing that, or would be stupid enough to do that, so you might as well fall in line. Now, before it gets really ugly. And it will get really ugly. And if you play the passive aggression game and still don't fall in line, then someone will pull a Jack London White Fang on you and go for your throat while you still think you are playing by the passive aggression rules. Socialization, the way you are socialized to think and to approach problems informed by the dominant culture, exists to fool you into playing by rules that keep you in line. This is one of the reasons I am carefully a trans ally. Queer theory is designed to fight exactly this sort of shit. How the queer community turned into what it is, which is playing by the exact same rules the theory was designed to defeat, I have no idea, but that doesn't matter. I feel I need to reiterate that every so often, when appropriate, to prevent human mold from growing. Anyway, to my mind, if overt aggression is inevitable, then that's what you need to develop practical experience with. And as much as you can get in as many varieties as you can get it. Because when the culture goons or subculture goons you're dealing with realize they can't pressure you, they'll hit you with overt aggression fast and hard. That means your livelihood, or even your life in some instances. And how do you develop this sort of strength? Not even just for trying to break away if that's what you want to do, but to defend yourself when you get singled out from the herd. And maybe you never get singled out from the herd, and you feel safe and secure within the herd, but the price you pay for feeling safe and secure and certain in your beliefs is utter unpreparedness when you do get singled out, if you get singled out. When you are, or you become the statistic, when something that couldn't happen to you does. You'll feel totally safe and confident unless that day comes. And then you'll be utterly unequipped. Well, one of the reasons I recommend weightlifting to everybody, including women who don't want to become bodybuilders, or people who don't see themselves lifting their entire lives, I recommend lifting and trying to achieve initiation, become an adept, reach that adept point, and then spend a little bit of time going beyond, trying to go beyond, because it teaches you how to persist and seek goals in an environment that doesn't make sense. It's surreal and cartoonish how strange weightlifting gets once you get past a point, because people's advice stops working, your programs stop working, and every time you get under or over a bar, you are risking your health on something that somehow, despite all this time and so many people lifting and so many experts, nobody can agree, and what works for one person does not work for you. 225 bench, for me, I think of it like Dolung Bridge in Apocalypse Now. This is the last point anything even pretends to try to make sense. Beyond this bridge are deep, seldom traveled waters with no sure means of navigation, with no one to come rescue you if something goes wrong. Waters that make your deadliest flaws and weaknesses come to the surface and summon some horrible predator from the darkness, tailor-made to prey on your weaknesses. Because when it rains, it pours. Because whenever you find yourself in these deep waters, and I'm beginning to think this sort of feeling happens in learning or attempting anything beyond the point of conventionality, you get hit hard where you really don't want to get hit hard, and you lose something serious when it happens. In weightlifting, you could suffer an intense injury or you could die. When you're seeking power and engaging in overt aggression with stakes, your ability to exist is at risk. And it is at risk even if you aren't doing this when it comes to power, because you never know when an authority figure is going to fuck you into the dirt. But it could happen, though it is unlikely to happen, but once you start seeking the power to do something about that, it's going to happen. And it is all on you. Advice doesn't work. You can't get anybody to help you. Contracts, social or literal, dissipate into nothing. Suddenly they stop mattering. And you're trying alone to fight the socialization of a nation. And that is possible, but even if you do feel this call, even if you do enter deep waters, you aren't special. You're probably going to die doing this. But what are you going to do if you feel this call, or if you're given reason to follow the call? Are you going to not do it? Are you going to live the rest of your life in fear that you'll be a statistic again? Doing nothing is an option, but not really. But the reason I recommend weightlifting is it teaches you the mindset of pursuing goals without a solid foundation and with a lot of danger. Because you don't just become really strong overnight. This takes years. And it takes years of progress not working. That's what a plateau is. You're stuck, you're in danger, and what other people say should work doesn't work. You have to figure out how to move yourself forward and achieve your goals with just your intuition and your resilience in a process that takes years. There are greater power levels out there, but you need to figure out how to get them your way. And that's one of the other things weightlifting teaches you. Strength is a universal standard when you think about it in terms of numbers, but when you think about it in terms of how one gets there and then how one uses that strength, you realize strength is not a universal standard in the numerical sense. It is your strength. You have to figure out what your strength is, how to increase it. Nobody else can teach you this. Nobody else can tell you this. Once you're in these deeper waters, it is your sword embedded in your stone. You're the only one who can draw it. You're the only one who can wield it. And it's up to you to decide how you wield it once you have it. This strength is nobody else's but yours. If you see a strong person, and when I say strong, I don't just mean physically, I mean any sort of strength, somehow people have this idea that it is a universal thing that anybody can achieve. When in reality, once you get into these deeper waters, you realize that they are strong, but it's theirs. And their method will not work for you because it's their method that they used to get their strength. I think objectivity is one of our culture's greatest flaws. The idea that everything always is objective, and even if you want to look at the world as if everything is objective, humans' idea of objectivity gets applied in a way that does not coincide with actual objectivity. Now, what is my power program right now? I'm trying to get comfortable with ugly conflict, because I'm still, despite working on it, bad at it. I'm realizing my childhood didn't equip me for anything. It gave me disabilities, vulnerabilities, people can and do use to control me. Now, 2 years ago, whenever anybody raised their voice unexpectedly around me, I would freeze up. That doesn't happen anywhere near as much. It still happens, but most of the time I'll still feel it, of course, but I can stay in control and get professional instead of getting mad, or not, or without the shadow taking over. It feels like my muscles are a creature wearing my skin, and whenever anybody tries to get loud with me, it's like the thing inside my skin moving. Now, that isn't the most controlled response, but it isn't a prey response either. And the other childhood disability I'm realizing I have, I'm putting this together right now, is a fear of aggressive, able-bodied men threatening or implying violence. And it didn't click with me that that was a childhood thing until today. So if an able-bodied man got violent type or violent threatening mean with me, which happened about 6 months ago, we talked about it, I freeze up or I want to cry and run away. And you cannot afford to have a reaction like that, to permit one. If you want to achieve real power, because able-bodied men, or whatever it is for you, will threaten you. And you don't want to freeze up at a bad moment. You can't afford to, no matter how good or understandable your reasons are. It's terrible that you have something like this happen to you, or something happen to you and you're stuck with a reaction like this, but you cannot afford not to address it. And that one's hard to address because as much as society does not want you capable of non-violent overt aggression, society really, really doesn't want you in touch with physical overt aggression. They don't want you even to have a tolerance for it. They want you to be terrified of it. Because when society brings its hammer down on you, for any reason, including no reason, maybe a cop just had a shitty day, Well, I was going to say, who are they going to throw at you? It's going to be a cop. It's going to be a man in a uniform with a gun who expects you to roll over and to be scared of him and to do whatever. Your default reaction cannot be to roll over and to cry and hope nothing bad happens. That's what they want your reaction to be, because that makes you easy to control, easy to inflict force upon. Now that is a much higher level of overt aggression. In weightlifting terms or benching terms, that's like 405, holy shit. But it's achievable. And I'm thankful, however false it may be, it's probably false, but holy shit, what if it isn't, that there is a subroutine in there for dealing with something like that that allows me to feel comfortable. At least comfortable enough to know that that is a level I can work toward, not need right now, even if I do need it right now. But that's a concession, and concessions are part of training. So how am I training for conflict? How am I building a conflict tolerance? 2 ways. First is low to no stakes. Here on YouTube, every single day, lines of people who are shitty or annoying, disrespectful, mean. And when I first started YouTube, I would try to engage with these people. Bad idea. Again, I recommend this to everybody. Start your own social media, anything, and learn what it's like to deal with faceless mobs. After I learned you can't reason with them, because everything comes back to society, everything comes back to culture, socialization. They're trying to homogenize you, exercise mob rule over you. You can't reason with them, so I tried ignoring them. That gave rise to Nazis getting comfortable on my channel long after we had stopped being Nazis, and polluting the channel. So that rises into blocking people. But blocking people, it solves the problem technically, but it feels like getting fed a fish instead of learning how to fish. You can't block people in real life unless you have a firearm and aren't long for this world. Which, we do have firearms, but we are very long for this world. There is a skill to be learned here, and that's given rise to where we are right now. Because when you're dealing with people, it's not about what's true or what's right. It's about mob rule and dominance. This channel, at least in this aspect, for now, has become an opportunity for me to get accustomed to people who outnumber you not liking you, getting quicker on your feet, identifying patterns, because everyone follows patterns. Everything is a pattern. And making points stylishly, right? Because one of the things about... When I was younger, I hated the concept of debate because it doesn't really matter. The truth doesn't really matter. What matters is what the audience, or the jury sometimes, thinks or wants to think. It is a verbal sparring match graded on appearances, on style. It's not what you think or the point you're trying to make. It is so much more about how you make it. How much you can deny your opponent stylishly and impose your own shit stylishly. That's all that matters. And this all happens within a facade built around the idea anybody cares about the truth or what's right. Nobody does. Everything comes down to power, aggression, and control. And who wins when different levels of conflict come out. And fortunately on YouTube, there are few to no stakes. you can practice wit and conflict tolerance at a low level, but still a level, safely. It makes me think about Tough Crowd. How did... there hasn't... no comedian outside Tough Crowd alumni are really funny, in my opinion. And when I say funny, I mean universally funny. There are lots of comedians who are funny at this or that, but there are no comedians outside them who are that funny always. And how did they do that? By engaging in verbal gladiatorial matches every night. My favorite relatively recent example, Dumb Sam Hyde somehow developed a grudge against Rich Voss and was talking shit about him online increasingly directly. And years ago I caught a little bit of this, but this was before I was deep in the Tough Crowd thing, so I knew who Rich Voss was, but I didn't really know him or like him. And then I found out Rich heard about this and responded to it. So I gotta watch this. How does dumb Rich Voss wipe the floor with a subcultural icon? By not being able to figure out how to work a computer to figure out who's trash-talking him or how to trash-talk in kind. Dumb Rich Voss's inability to work a computer was funnier than Sam Hyde's diatribe. You reach that level of power, the ability to defeat someone with your own incompetence by challenging and being challenged aggressively for years. A lifetime. Reaching a point you can demonstrate you're too old for this in a funny way, in a dismissive way, using your own incompetence. Now that's a power level, that's an example of a power level, but it's also... Rich Voss is the best. One of the best. One of the last real comics working, because he can't afford to retire, because he works restaurants. Now, the other level of conflict tolerance, conflict training I have access to is my career. And I differentiate or distinguish career from job in that job, all that's required of you is to show up and do as you're told. Whereas with careers, you're still expected to show up and do as you're told, but you also need higher level skills. And with careers, you'll see those skills you learn with your career, the skills you're paid to learn, benefit you in your day-to-day life. If you don't have a career right now, try to get one. Pick something. Having a career and developing those skills, it's a game changer. Now, my career forces me to deal with conflict still at a lower level, but face-to-face. My career grays my hair, but I've noticed it is harder to punk me, and I am more able to deal with difficult personalities in real life. And you also get tastes of the things people are willing to do when this fake civility shit breaks down. Like this reporting bullshit, like that dude who tried me, and that was so humiliating for his little angry, insulting temper tantrum to work on me just because he is a male pretending or acting like he's going to get physical. He's not going to get physical, and if he did, at least with this dude, it wouldn't have gone well, and I feel pretty confident about that. But, again, humiliation. It's humiliating because I was weak enough for that to work on. What am I going to do when Mr. 6'6", 300 pounds does that and is not like a Don Fanucci? A clown. You can't afford to freeze up at a bad moment. So fortunately, my career gives me some exposure to these things that I will be dealing with more intensely one of these years. I'm losing steam, and I realized, we mentioned at the very beginning, there's probably an ideal order to do this in. We did not achieve the ideal order, and there are still points to go through. Shit. Magic is a key to power. You'll notice we stopped talking about magic almost entirely for a while, and that's because magic will get you killed. In terms of power gain, magic is screwy because you'll start it as a goof, you'll think nothing is happening, and then all of your spells pop at once, and you suffer the, I've been playing a lot of RimWorld, neural heat, psychic overload with interest all at once. Magic is really great, but it will kill you. There are safer ways to develop strength and power. But if you've never studied magic, something to keep in mind. Don't fuck around with it, but don't disregard it. If you want to try to change things, to change the system, you won't do it within the system. Because the people who run the system and benefit most from the system run it and keep it under control by brainwashing people with culture, with socialization. That's why whenever you get close to challenging power or developing something that could challenge power, everything that you are conditioned to think works a certain way gets turned on you, turned against you. Like, for example, an extreme example, let's say you think you need to breathe oxygen. It is so ingrained in your mind that you can't imagine living without breathing oxygen. That's just natural. That's the necessary and right thing to do, breathing oxygen. And then someone gasses you, and you breathe it in and die because you think you need to breathe. When in reality, you're an nth dimensional being, and you breathe, or you exist only in ways you are conditioned to do or to be, when you don't really need to be any of these things. Everything you think is essential or fundamental is really just a net of social controls you have been socialized to believe by people who benefit from your believing them, and from everybody's believing them. Because if one person or a few people get out of socialization, they don't have to do anything. They have an army of people who will happily crusade on their behalves, just to experience the catharsis of imposing on another person and being rewarded for it, instead of imposing against the larger culture, which they will be stomped into mush for. If you want the chance at changing things, and not even changing things totally, but just nudging society a little bit closer to your ideal of the way things work, you need to get outside of it. And in the same way you pay for certainty or the idea of certainty and security and rightness with vulnerability and weakness and unpreparedness, you pay for your chance at nudging society in a direction you think is good with death, with insecurity, with zero safety. It's a steep price and a path you're expected to die on, but if that's the one you want to walk, there isn't another way to walk it. You're not going to change the system from the inside. And to get outside the system, you need the strength to achieve escape velocity and auto guns on your rocket of a life to shoot down all of the missiles coming at you. It's not easy and it's not going to end well, but do you really want to live your entire life controlled by cunty little people who are more like cells of a larger, controlling, terrible organism than they are people? In the same way, a cop, most of their power comes from the uniform they wear and what it represents, the full support, the illegal support in many cases. Well, I guess it depends on how you view legality, because if they're the ones who control the laws, is it really illegal when they break them? Who knows? But they're only as powerful as their connection to the larger organism of the state is. That's the way Joe Dipshit operates, but instead of an officer and a state, it is an organism and the dominant memes. Maybe that's why I hate people so much. They're all little cops serving a culture that does not essentially act according to what they say it represents. My dream, if I dare to dream it, and I do have a dream, involves a lot of fire and magic and the wrath of Venus. One of my favorite things about Vampire 5 is everyone seems to be complaining about the way the Sabbat have been turned into these little terrorist cells, but I kind of like them more in this way. It demonstrates their determination, and it appeals both to my anarcho-directional and my fascisti-national sensibilities. The Sabbat are right again, and now they're little cells carrying out acts of terror, and they perform the Valkyrie. The Valkyrie is one of the most beautiful things I've ever read. Everybody pours their blood into a chalice and everyone drinks from it, and then they're all bonded to one another. They stop mattering individually. What continues to matter, what persists through this bonding, is the fact that they're right about everything and their dedication to each other and their ideals. The Valkyrie is beautiful. The intersection of individualism and collectivism, united by one ideal they uphold through violence, and pursue unto final death. How else, how better can someone exhibit their dedication? Especially when you no longer have a dominant culture to adhere to. All you have is each other. And violence. And, of course, being absolutely right about everything. Alright. We've calmed down, but seek strength. The rest will follow. Identify your weaknesses and figure out how you're going to deal with them, because you will be tested on them in the hardest ways. Throw off the chains of socialization in as much as you can, in as much as anyone can. Figure out how to turn anything that would seem to be bad into a positive that makes you stronger or fortifies your position better. There are so many things that you view as bad and are bad. One of the things I've been wanting to talk about but haven't found an excuse to: why does everybody need to have silver linings to everything? Some things are just bad. There's not some kind of secret goodness to it. That said, sometimes with bad things like this, you can figure out how to how to make them work for you, or how to in a counterattack sort of way, make them give you something valuable for the offense, the slight of inconveniencing or attacking you, and develop the skills or the willpower, whatever you want to call it, to pursue goals you know exist but don't have a clear path toward beyond the limits of conventional teaching or instruction or support. Because there are worthwhile and empowering goals out there, they're just going to take you a long time to reach, and nobody can help you, and there's no sure way to reach them. And frankly, you might not reach them, but again, are you not going to try? Do you need to be guided and instructed and commanded at every stage of your life to get anywhere? Do you need someone controlling you for your life to be valuable? I don't think so. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't.